All right, check, check. Let's see if this is working this time. Check, 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 check. uh, okay, very good. This is a rehearsal of practice of a talk that I'll be giving at the Association for the Scientific Study of Consciousness on um, on Sunday. So this is some work that I have done with Adriana Renero, who's here with us today, and I'll be doing the presenting, and we'll be taking questions jointly together at the end. So my aim is to go for about 10 minutes to leave as much time as we can in this setting for discussion. So today we'll be talking about a horror theory for introspective consciousness. And to begin, I want to talk a little bit about the horror theory of phenomenal consciousness, and then the way in which Adriana and I have tried to extend it to introspective consciousness. So as a bit of a background to the discussion, higher order theories have been discussed in various places throughout the conference, I'm sure, and there are different ways of formulating them. As I understand, higher order theories are those that invoke inner awareness as part of the explanation of what phenomenal consciousness is. So the first order theories deny that inner awareness plays any role in making it the case that there is phenomenal consciousness, and higher order theories, in some respect or other, think that inner awareness plays this important role. Now, the horror theory, which is a higher order theory of phenomenal consciousness, takes inner awareness to be the occurrence of representations of one's own mental life. These representations represent one as currently being in the targeted mental states with their specific content and character. And according to the horror theory, that's what phenomenal consciousness is. So if we were to kind of map this out pictorially, we start thinking maybe there are perceptible properties in the external environment. There may become to be creatures that come to represent those perceptible properties. So they may have first order states that have mental qualities, like I have diagrammed up here, called R star. There may be conceptual representations. There's something red in the environment, for example. These first order states are going to have causal connections to the environment and to other mental states that guide the organism's behavior. So in a sense, we can say that this creature is aware of the perceptible property in the environment and is going to behave in characteristic ways with respect to it. So that is part of the story here, but there is no consciousness yet, according to this picture. That occurs when you represent yourself as seeing the object. On the horror theory, phenomenal consciousness, the what is likeness of red, the visual experience, it consists in the occurrence of the suitable higher order representation to the effect that one is seeing that thing or hearing or whatever the case may be. So this is a relative of various other higher theories, and there's lots to say about it, but I'll sort of leave that for discussion if anyone's interested. The idea that we have is that, generally speaking, if you're a higher order theorist and you're trying to account for introspection, that you would then posit a third order thought, third order representation, sorry, one that represents you as being in the second order state. But we think that this is problematic for a couple of reasons that I don't really have time to go into. But the primary one is that it doesn't capture the phenomenology of introspection, the sense in which what it's like for one when one introspects is like being acquainted, having a direct acquaintance relation to one's experiences. So on the view that we defend, rather than having a third order thought, which represents the second order thought, one instead comes to have a different higher order representation. One represents the first order state not as one seeing red in the environment, but rather as one experiencing that perceptible red in distinctly visual ways. So now I have this thing kind of moving into the mind here. That doesn't mean I think that's really what it's like when you introspect, but it does capture, I think, that even though it appears still to you that the object's out there, when you're introspecting your experience of the object, what changes is that the thing which you previously took to be mind independent, you now are aware of it as being a property of your experience. So that's what introspective consciousness is, according to this view that we call the horrific view. Horrific as a nod to the horror theory on which it's based, but it also captures the idea that these higher order representations are made intentionally for introspective consciousness. They treat introspective consciousness as another kind of phenomenal consciousness, by which I mean there's something that it's like for you to introspect, and then the theory tries to explain what it's like for you in the way that it explains what it's likeness, generally speaking. Now, the kind of introspection that we've been focusing on to introduce the account is what we have called self-triggered introspection. This comes from a paper from 2019 by Adriana, where she introduced this distinction. And self-triggered introspection is the selective process by which one's own interests and volitions initiate the higher order representation of an occurrent first order representation. So this is the kind of case we were just describing. One willfully chooses to introspect, and then as a result, one's higher order state changes in the way that we were postulating. But there's another kind of introspective occurrence, which Renero calls stimuli induced. And this is a kind of automatic, a receptive introspective consciousness. So it's not directed by your volitions or guided by what you're interested in, but it's rather a kind of spontaneous or automatic occurrence of a higher order representation due to something in the environment. So to give an example, suppose we go back to this picture on the horror theory. When you're consciously experiencing the redness of the object in the environment, it's due to you having this higher order representation. Suppose I took off my glasses and then suddenly the thing on the screen becomes blurry. Well, according to the view that we have been discussing, that's because there's a causal connection between what's these various states here, such that when the glasses come off, the first order state is changed. And that causes a spontaneous or automatic change in the content of the higher order representation, which now represents you as experiencing a blurred seeing of a red rectangle. And that captures the idea that when I take my glasses off, I notice immediately something is different. My attention is captured. And we think that the attention is captured by the change in my experience. And this happens a lot of times where something, you drop a hammer on your foot and all of a sudden you're focused on the conscious experience of the pain. So there are many, many examples, I think. I don't want to speak for Adriana, she can speak for herself, but I think this is kind of a plentiful occurrence, whereas the kind of self-induced introspection happens a bit rarer. It takes a bit of training and effort. This happens automatically and all the time. Now, just to be sure about this, we would distinguish this from a case where you represent yourself as seeing something blurry in the environment, as opposed to, as notice the animations are off here, so maybe I'll have to check on that. But here in this case, if you represent yourself as seeing a blurry red rectangle, then what it's like for you will be seeing something external to you, which is blurry. Whereas in the previous case, you represent yourself as experiencing blurry seeing. And so what it's like for you is not like seeing something that's out there, which is blurry, but rather like your experience is blurry. And I can tell you that I had this change occur to me. I was reading a book and I thought the text was printed in a blurry way, and I complained actually that it was poorly printed. It turns out that the portion of that book that I was reading was just printed in a smaller font than the rest of the book. It was a quoted paragraph or something, I forget. And it was just printed in a smaller font. So it looked blurry to me, but I took the blurriness to be on the page. I didn't know that it was something going on with my eyes. And I think that that's probably because the change had been gradual over time. Whereas in the case of taking my glasses off, it happens very quickly and automatically. My attention is captured. So we could discuss that a little bit more, but that's how the horrific view would capture this distinction. And of course, there's a lot more to say about this. We talk about this in our paper, which was recently published in the Journal of Consciousness Studies, a horror theory for introspective consciousness. So if anyone's interested, please feel free to send us an email, and we would love to send you a copy of that, and I'll end there and take any questions. Thank you. Let's hope it recorded the sound this time.